Well, this is a very special day for me. It's the first time that I get to have a face-to-face live meeting, even though it's over the screen, with my friend Safi Kaskas. And now we also got to meet each other's wives, and so we want to introduce them. Why don't you start over there? And well, you can introduce yourself, right? Eman?
Go ahead, Eman.
Well, I'm Eman, married to Safi for 45 years, and we are partners in many aspects, including our faith journey. We are Muslims, and we both follow Jesus, and I have supported Safi's project of translating the Qur'an because we both believe in it and believe in the objective that this translation would help us achieve and bring in a better understanding among people of faith of who we are. So we have this calling in life, both of us, and we're on this journey together, totally and completely. We believe in the same things. We don't always agree on the journey, getting to it, but it's been a nice journey, and I'm grateful for the opportunity that the Lord has given us to partner in life and to partner for this cause.
Oh, that's wonderful. Eden, why don't you jump in now and just introduce yourself to them a little bit and who you are, what you're into?
Sure. Wow, I love your intro, Eman. It's there's a lot that I can agree with in telling the same story that Brad and I have been married for, it's close to 34 years now, and we have been partners and journey mates on a lot of fronts, including our faith. And especially in this last while we are locked up together, I'm happy to be stuck with him, and happy to be in the house together, having conversations that come up randomly. What do you think of this? What do you think of that? And listening to him read things that he's just been writing. And I'm really glad that as humans, we can experience relationships where the longer we have them, the more there is still to discover. And it's fascinating to me. And I think it's very hope-filled as well. We have co-led in churches and led separately in churches, and currently we actually go to different churches, which was something I never imagined, but it has not created any division in us. In some ways it has actually raised each of us up in quite an amazing way, kind of having a little bit of our own space, and we're never, having any sort of tension over why do you believe that or why do you believe that, because we are invested in each other and we believe in the same God. And so anyways, I'm really pleased to meet you guys today. Brad has spoken very highly of you, Safi, and you've been an encouragement. And I wanted to thank you both as well. You had texted or phoned or something a while back and had said, our family was on your heart and that you had been praying for us. And I have been going through some medical issues, and you had said, well, we're praying for you today. And that really moved me. It was so encouraging and such a loving thing to do. And I just wanted to say my heartfelt thank you for praying for me.
I hope everything is fine now and all is well.
Not quite yet, but there's hope for sure.
That means we'll continue to pray.
Praying.
Thank
Pray
you.
for total healing.
Yeah, thank you.
So in that brief set of introductions, I think we've already established a number of surprises that I want to explore with you by way of conversation. And so the fact that we would see one another as brothers and sisters will surprise some people, both Muslim and Christian. The fact that you would be praying for us might surprise some people, but also that you are followers of Jesus and Muslims would be news to a lot of Christians. They're like, well, wait a minute, how can that be, right? And so maybe we could start with some of these, which I think it's wonderful. But so here'd be my first question about that: on what basis do we call one another brothers and sisters in the Lord?
Well, the least of the bases, there are many bases. The least of them is our humanity.
Yes.
We are both created by the same creator. And in my tradition, this creator said in the Qur'an that he had honored all the children of Adam, all of them. The least I can do to honor whom he honored is to love them.
Yeah.
There is no way out of it. Nobody can whistle away from love. Regardless which direction they go, they have to come back and face themselves and look at the mirror and say, am I doing what the Lord has truly asked me to do? And that's to love other people, to honor them, to respect them, to deal with them as people that are dear to their creator. Otherwise, he wouldn't have created them. You know, look at the multiple chances that were taken before I was born. I mean, I wasn't an accident. I was meant to be born the same way you were meant to be born. Now, your ideas and my ideas, where the Lord wants you to be and where the Lord wants me to be, brought us together. The least I can do is to honor that. The least. Now, I'm enjoying it, and I am very joyful at it, and I'm celebrating it all the time. I truly love you. You know?
I know. Thank you. It's mutual.
You know? I mean, look at who the Lord brought me. It's a gift, you know. And now I have two, you and Adam. So,
so that's one layer, the layer of that we're both we're humans together. Now there's other layers too, right?
Yeah. Yes, indeed. The higher layer.
It is one layer, but you know, Jesus said on this aspect falls all the laws of all the prophets. So he reminded us of how important that is. And the Quran states in a verse that is near to my heart also, and it appears on chapter 2 and chapter 3 of the Quran, say, we believe in God and what he revealed to us and what he revealed to Abraham, Ishmael, Isaac, Jacob, and the tribes, and the teaching of Moses and Jesus and the prophets from their God. We do not differentiate between any of them, and we are all to him submissive. And then again, Prophet Muhammad said, you do not believe unless you love for your brother what you love for yourself. Wow. So Jesus told us, it summarized the whole aspect of believing. And the Quran confirmed with telling us that God does not differentiate between the believers, no matter who their prophet was, as long as they are following God through the message or the scriptures of their prophet. Then God in the Quran tells me that they are submissive, which is the way Safi translated the word Muslimun, which is plural for Muslim. So to me, the two are the same. Following Jesus is the same as that diversity that the Quran provides for us to love one another and to believe in God through our journey that we just happen to be walking through.
Very good.
Yes. Can I have a small comment on what Eman said?
Yes, a footnote of her. Yes.
Footnote. Intentionally, I never translated the word Islam as a noun. For Eman and I, the word Islam was always like a continuous noun.
It's an active
Like an
noun.
active noun. Like
Yeah.
it's like a verb. To be a Muslim is to continue all the time to try to submit yourself to your Creator's will.
And you fall short.
And you
But
fall
you-
short. Do you
but
try
you-
again?
You get up and you try again, and it's a continuous. One time I told a follower of Jesus from a Christian background, I think you're a Muslim, and he really showed the most understanding of what the word means. He said, "My dear, I try every day, and every day I fall short, but I get up the next day and try again." And I said, "Oh my God, that is a true connection with the Lord and a true understanding of what the word means that not everyone internalizes."
Right. So now you've introduced this idea that I think will be mind-blowing for many Christians, and that is that you follow Jesus, and that this is an important part of your faith.
Yes.
And what do you want to tell us about that for those who've never
Can
heard
I
this
say
before?
something here, though? I
Please
want
do.
to say something.
This is for both of you.
I also consider people who are not calling themselves Muslim, but they do believe in God to be Muslim. So there is that intertwine that happens among us, people who truly are trying to follow the Lord and to be truthful to ourselves in the way we seek Him. So for me, Jesus was hijacked by Christianity because He is universal. He didn't come to be branded a certain name. I think when He comes back, He's going to reject that notion totally and completely because He is for everyone. He talked to the woman at the well. He talked to us about the prostitute, about those people that were forgotten. The Good Samaritan story. All of these stories are about how Jesus is beyond the establishment. Islam also was hijacked by Muslim because it became a noun. It became a name. It was no longer that action-oriented word that means that you really have to try, that it's not a given that you are a Muslim. So that term was hijacked in a similar fashion by Muslim, like this is why Safi's translation with fresh eyes to the Qur'an makes a whole lot of difference. It's revolutionary in my opinion because it brings these things under the microscope and it projects the light on them for people to understand that these are not words to be memorized and repeated. These are words to internalize and to ponder on and to really learn from. Sorry, I interrupted.
No, that was wonderful.
I'm proud of her.
I have a question related to this because it feels like something that happened to me yesterday. I was in a podcast and they said, we were going to ask you yes and no questions. And then they said later you can nuance the answers, but for now I want yes or no. And they asked me, are you a Christian? And I paused for a long time and I had to say no for this reason, right? Because Christian as a noun is become this, it's a very small institution in terms of the heart of God. And so later I was able to say, what if we were to treat Christian as an adjective? Then I won't claim that because I don't follow Jesus very well, but maybe you could ask my neighbors, is he Christian, right? And that would be similar, like, are you?
Yes.
So yes, I identify with the Jesus story, but Christian as a club, an exclusive club makes no sense to me. But if it were an adjective describing how I live, well, maybe I'm still not, but at least we will let my neighbors decide, right? We'll let you decide.
Yes. Yeah.
I did not forget your question. We need to get back to it.
Okay.
What does it mean for me to follow Jesus?
Yeah.
But again, it's necessary to mention some stories that would lead to that. After 9/11, Eman met Doug Ko. I don't know if you know who Doug Ko is.
No.
He's the guy that used to put the prayer breakfast together.
Yes.
In the National Prayer Breakfast. And he has a group, they are called the Family. And Eman met them in a prayer meeting. She met them. And then I met him. Dako didn't used to call himself a Christian, although he used to be considered the fifth evangelical leader in the United States with influence and so on. Well, why? Because he considered himself purely a follower of Jesus. To him, Christianity didn't mean anything. Jesus meant everything.
Mm.
In a sense, he and I walked together. I learned from him a lot, and I tried to also share my belief with him. So Eman and I, in a sense, spent a lot of time with this particular person. God bless his soul. He's dead now. He's gone. But we still have tremendous good memories of the years. We walked with him. We talked to him. We learned from him. And we shared with him.
And we miss him very much.
We miss him very much indeed, because he's the first one that gave me hope after 9/11. You know, after 9/11, I was shocked that the President of the United States, who claimed to be a Christian, who told his father, I listened to the higher father. He told his own father, President Bush, told his own father, President Bush, I listened to a higher father. Then his response to 9/11 was not a response of love.
Yeah, it was either you're with us or against us. Yeah, and
I have no doubt that hundreds of thousands of people, innocent people in Iraq and Afghanistan died as a result of his actions.
yeah,
Innocent people means had nothing to do with this. You know, I mean, why did they die? Nobody knows. Iraq is in ruins now. If he was a true follower of Jesus, his response would have been different. As a matter of fact, from my own studies, I don't know if I'm correct or not, I haven't found a single leader in history that responded to his enemies with love. Not one stood up and said, I'm going to love you instead of fighting you, instead of conquering you, of crushing you. I'm going to love you. This response, in my mind, will change the world.
yes,
And it did not happen. We had that chance after 9/11. I mean, God gave the President of the United States on a silver platter a chance to show the world what following Jesus means. And he missed it.
yeah,
And Dako brought me back. He anchored me in truly what Jesus taught. Instead of feeling anguish and anger and all of this, he said, calm down. This is a test that this guy missed. We shouldn't miss. You didn't miss. You're still loving your enemies. Regardless how much insults they throw at you, you're going to respond with love. And I appreciate that. You know, that's very valuable as far as I'm concerned. So following Jesus to me means, to start with, regardless how anybody understands Jesus, I understand Jesus to be the miracle of miracles based on the Qur'an, not my own thinking. His conception was a miracle. His birth was a miracle in the Qur'an. Immediately after he was born, he spoke as far as the Qur'an is concerned, and that's a miracle. Calmed his mother down. It was, I mean, a young virgin from the Middle East, raised among people with piety, and and suddenly she's pregnant and having a child. So anyway, he performed miracles throughout his life, and probably the Beatitudes and the Sermon on the Mountain can summarize his teachings.
yes.
And I love them. I cannot disagree with anything that's in red letters. So I love everything you said, So
It's very ironic. I bring this up with nowadays because I have quoted red letters to Christians specifically about enemy love, and they told me I was dangerously naive. And I said, I was quoting the red letters. And so now here we are. I'm talking to Jesus following Muslims, but I'm also having to deal with non-Jesus following Christians.
Yes.
And it seems to me that, I really believe you're right about that. The Sermon on the Mount really encapsulates Jesus' teachings. And when I have to when I'm assessing, he says, judge, you know, don't judge, but observe people by
Yes.
the fruit, right? And so at the end of the Sermon on the Mount, it says, here's the wise person who builds their house on the rock. They hear
Yeah.
these words of mine and put them into practice. That's a Jesus follower. And it sounds like, well, what I know of you, you did this beautiful commentary on the Beatitudes for Clarion Journal with us. And
Yes.
taking Jesus seriously, not just believing in him, you know, as an idea, but believing what he said, that this is how we're going to change the world.
He gave me a plan to live by.
Yeah.
I found the same plan laid out in the Quran, but that plan in the Quran is not said in simple, easy to understand, direct language, the way Jesus spoke about his plan for me. You know, it's all there in the Quran, but you really have to contemplate, you have to think, you have to find it. For instance, loving your enemy. I had to look for it.
Right.
Are we, I mean, Jesus says to love your enemy. I know this is not something easy. It's not something for the faint of heart. It's not something for, but then is it in the Quran? Yes, I went and looked for it and I found it, you know, and I found it in tremendous language. But unfortunately, it's not repeated every day. It's not part of the culture that the Muslims have for their daily life until Eman or I remind them that it's there.
Okay.
Then it's like shock, you know?
Yep.
Yeah, sure. You know, one day, Brad, I was commenting on something on Facebook and I said to respond in love. This woman responded, but this is for Christian. It's not for Muslims. This, I mean, regardless of her or what she said, it tells me the general attitude there out with the people in the street, people, average people, they think of us and them. They're not thinking that we are all created by the same creator and we are created, so it's a test for us to test our hearts. Are we going to grow up and love each other, or are we going to reject each other? And he said he's going to judge us for this, you know, at one time in the hereafter. But people don't have that consciously. They're not thinking of, only the blessed, I think, get it in his heart or in her heart that this is something real. I am going to be resurrected in reality, and I'm going to face my Creator, and that's real. And he's going to ask me for sure, and I cannot lie then, you know?
Right. So our you know, we've got years and years, centuries of conflict, both in terms of theological debate, but also just downright like military hostility and all that. But we're finding an ethical unity around compassion and love, aren't we? That seems to be the basis then for our unity together.
It's the hope. It's the hope. If we can set an example for others, others will follow. You know, let me take it a bit wider than this.
Okay.
I've been in touch with evangelicals for at least 10 years, more than that. At one time, I had a conversation with 300 evangelical young leader online. Carl Madieris led that conversation. I don't know if you know Carl.
Mm-hmm.
He led that conversation, and they were all his friends. And they were asking me questions. And see, my purpose of talking to them at that time is very simple. If in the United States, where we have the freedom to think and the freedom to act, if we here in the United States, we can build true bridges between evangelicals and Muslims, then we can be an example for the rest of the world to follow.
Right.
You know? Yeah. See, again, 9/11 was a major failure for humanity to reinvent itself. We stopped at the tragedy. We didn't go beyond the tragedy to reconciliation and bridge building. And it's very important in God's eye, I think, to take any event and try to see the positive in it and build on that, rather than to stop at the tragedy and cry all the time, or talk about the bad luck we had, or those others who are terrible. And so anyway, I wanted to build bridges because I thought this is the place, United States is the place where we can think freely, we can exchange freely. I can say I'm a Jesus follower without any fear that someone will say, why? Well, this is my right, my constitution,
Yep.
If you like it, go and get yourself a constitution and and enjoy freedom. But I enjoy the freedom this constitution gives me. Let's use it. Let's use this freedom to build bridges, to build something constructive, so we can move together rather than separate. See, we are people of faith, we. So I see you the same way I see Eman, the same way I see all my believing friends. Mercy Aiken is one of them.
Yes.
I love her because of her heart, So all my believing friends are brothers and sisters to me. We need to move together, not separately. We shouldn't let issues separate us. The main issue is we are recognizing that the Creator is our Creator and we owe Him. He deserves that we worship Him because He's worth it. He deserves it.
Yeah. So you brought up the word freedom here now a number of times. So what I'd like to do for a moment is, and then we're going to get to, I want to get to things like women in Islam and so on. But at one time you said online that you believe the essence of the Qur'an is freedom.
Yes, freedom. Yes.
Can you tell us about that? That was new to me.
Absolutely. I worked on the Qur'an 6 years continuously, full time, from Fajr prayer, which is before sunrise, all the way to 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, every day, no weekends. And I was determined to finish that project because I felt that I was honored to do it. It's an honor for me that I was entrusted to do this. But then after I finished working on the translation, like a couple of months later, I stopped and asked myself, what did I learn from this book? What is it trying to tell me? What's the essence of that book? And I really thought about it. And then a word came to my mind. I didn't invent it. It was an answer to my question. What's the essence of the Quran? That word was freedom. I created you so you can come to me freely with your free will. If one of you is forced to come to me, it doesn't count. I created you, I gave you consciousness, gave you a free will, so you can use it and reason, use your reason, your intellect, so you can come to me freely. This is why I created you. So I said, consequently, freedom is the essence of the Quran.
That's really important. I've been meditating on it a lot. Just how go ahead, Eman.
There is a verse in the Quran that I think it's worthwhile stating. It says, "Man sha'a falyu'min wa man sha'a falyakfur."
Whoever wants can believe, and whoever wants can reject belief. I mean,
it's there.
Yeah, many verses in the Quran tells you that you're free. Another verse, which is on a deeper level, God has a will. He says in the Quran, He can create anything He wants, anything He wills to create. And then He said, I gave you a will. What? He gave me a will? Wow. What should I do with that will? Well, decide on the rest of my life. I'm always, you and I, and all of us, everybody, when anytime we are faced with a choice, we're between two choices only, there is no third. I've been challenging people around the world to come out with a third alternative. None exists. Am I doing it, like this interview, am I doing it to please God? Or am I doing it so maybe other people would say, oh, he's so nice. Look, he loves Jesus. And, you know, like the Pharisees used to do. Like Jesus said about fasting. Don't fast so people can see you. And, you know, so anyway, this is the first choice. Am I doing it to please God or to please what? My selfishness, my own ego. There is no third choice. It's either this or that. Every act, 7 days a week, all year long, my whole life, it's between these two choices. So I'm God conscious. In Arabic, this God conscious is a term in Arabic called taqwa. Taqwa is a concept. You need to know that concept, Brad.
Okay.
Taqwa means taking shelter from. Like ittaqil matar in Arabic means take shelter because it's raining.
Okay.
Like open an umbrella. Ittaqillah, take shelter of God, means run away from him into him.
Ah.
It's a very difficult
Quran,
word to translate.
It
was a very
it's a concept. It's a word, but in the Quran is full of that word. The purpose of all acts of worship, the Quran tells me, is taqwa, is God consciousness. The purpose of all acts. I'm fasting now. Eman is fasting. We're going through Ramadan. The purpose, the Quran says, the purpose of your fasting is that you reach taqwa, God consciousness.
Wow.
Now, what's the ultimate purpose of God consciousness? Is to build peace.
Wow.
Yeah. So people can read the Quran, Brad. The Quran is not a joke. The Quran is a very serious revelation. When I say I believe in it, not because I'm simple or because I'm naive. Look, before I translated the Quran, I spent 3 years looking to see if there are any first century original copies. First Islamic century, that means 7th century Gregorian. 3 years going from one place to the other, examining manuscripts until I found there are 3 that I was sure will suffice. And I started examining new printed copies of the Quran from China all the way to Morocco. And I found that there are no differences between them. Then I decided to embark on the translation of the Quran. I did not want to spend my time, dedicating my time to a book that has question marks in it. And so when I tell you I take it very seriously, is because it's worth being taken seriously. You know, people can read it, can understand it, and you can read it and understand it on various levels. What we just talked about, those concepts we just mentioned, they're not something that you can stop somebody on the streets in Cairo and say, what's taqwa? He will not know. He will not know. He will probably understand it on a certain level, but would not be what we just discussed.
Okay.
You know?
Well, I want to pause there just to promote your translation. I think, you know, because I believe we're brothers and sisters in the Lord, I want to understand where you're coming from. And so I got a translation of your translation of the Quran, and I'm really grateful for it. And I would want others to pick that up. There's actually an edition of it that has biblical, what do you call it, cross references in the footnotes. And they can get that. Where's the best place for them to pick that up?
Usually it is Amazon, but okay. If they want a copy that is signed, they need to contact me and I will send them one directly.
What's the best way to contact you?
On Facebook.
Okay.
Or the email.
Facebook, I'm all over the Facebook, or my email, you know. But you can find both my Facebook page and my email on the internet.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that was go ahead, Safi.
15 ministers got together and decided to get copies of that Quran translation with references to the Bible 3 weeks ago.
Mhm.
3 weeks ago.
We just mailed them.
We send it to them, and you know, it's amazing. The first 1,000 copies, first order was for 1,000 copies that were purchased by a Christian foundation that owns schools, and they wanted them for their schools. So, Brad, only the squeaking wheel get the grease. There are millions of American evangelicals who are brothers and sisters to us. We just don't hear from them a lot. You know, they're not making too much noise. We hear a lot from those who are carrying and standing up in front of the governor's office somewhere in a state and making all kind of noise. But those that are loving, that are peaceful, that think about the Lord all the time, and think of me as a brother, and think of Eman as a sister. We don't hear much from them, you know, but the country is full of them. We need to count on that. We know they're there.
Yeah, the smallest seed will become a great plant, and the leaven will permeate the loaf.
Yes.
Let's just shift now a little bit. So I am aware of how within Christianity, there's a long history of the oppression of women, and Eden is a good example of someone who walks in the freedom that I believe Jesus gave. But there's also this misconception from that Islam is oppressive of women, and that we really associate that, and maybe because we see the news items, or we have cultures that women really are oppressed. But I'm looking at Eman, and you seem quite liberated to me. What do you want to tell us about being a female in your faith?
Well, you know, I don't think God wants women to feel oppressed. That I know for a fact. And the Qur'an tells me that repeatedly. Prophet Muhammad married Khadija, who was a businesswoman, and she was independent. That was his wife for 25 years. He was working for her, and because of his honesty, she decided to marry him. She asked him to marry her. So that tells you that women are not creatures in our culture to be considered as oppressed. I don't see that even in Saudi Arabia, where I live. I mean, women right now are doing amazing things, very extremely independent. I look at Jesus, for example, and see how God honored him with his mother. How also that I think about the woman that found him after he was buried and he had risen, and it was woman that stood by him and cared for him when he needed that help. So I think God loves women and honors them by giving them things to do that are way heart moving and heart touching. The Quran, when it's giving commands, it's addressing men and women equally. There are repeated verses in the Quran where we are called upon on an equal footage with the men, that we are not less. Now, culture is a different story. Our part of the world was under the Ottoman occupation for many, many years. I mean, I'm talking now about Islamic and Ottoman and what people thought Islam to be. And so they thought that women's place was not in the forefront. They needed to be hidden because they represented certain honor or lack of honor to the man. So it's not about God in the way he looked at us. It's about how men feel about themselves in respect to women. Christianity, at the same situation in the Middle Ages, considered women to have no soul, and that they needed also to be hidden, and that they couldn't be out there in the forefront. So these are all culture. They are not of God. The way I read the Quran, I see tremendous honor given to women. And I see women have taken place. Yes, they had to fight for it. I look at Egypt, for example, as an example, and I look at that, we call it manpower. It's really man and woman power that is equal, that almost every woman there is a working woman. Saudi Arabia took a little bit longer, but now women have taken their place in the working force. Lebanon has always been an open place where women had their rights given to them. So I would say it's cultural, and cultural things have tendency to alienate women and leave them on the like bystander as opposed to giving them. But when we think about it, and we know that woman raises the family, woman is the cornerstone, the buttress of the families. Nothing happened without her presence, without a mother, a woman, a female presence in the home. Family, as we know it, will collapse. And so therefore, it's a very important role that I don't see Islam as taking it away from her, but in giving it so much importance.
Can I add a few things here? Although I'm not a woman, but
yes, please.
We have to judge things in context. We cannot take things out of context and then say Islam does this or Islam does that. When Islam was born in the 7th century, some woman like Khadija, the woman who was in business, who asked the Prophet's hand in marriage, had privileges because they were wealthy. So wealth was the name of the game. If you're wealthy, you have privileges. But if you're not wealthy, you're less than a commodity. Prostitution was rampant at that time. Women did not inherit, were not allowed to inherit, were not allowed to lead, were not allowed to have any position of leadership. And the Quran gave them all this. So if you take it in context, the Quran created a revolution in the 7th century. But then that revolution ended a few years later when Muslims built an empire. See, empires have a corruptive influence on the people. When Constantine decided Christianity should be the religion of the empire, Christians became something different than what they used to be before that. When Muslims built an empire, Islam lost a lot of its spirituality, and it became less egalistic as far as men and women are concerned. Men were up front, they were leading, they were doing everything, and women were pushed to the back. But up to that point, several women were leaders among Muslims, teaching Muslims their religion. Among them, Aisha. After Khadija died, the Prophet married Aisha. Aisha lived with him for many years until he died. And then she was a source of information about how the Prophet did this, what did he say about that, and so on. So they were yielding to her opinion about the Prophet, and she was a leader. But then with the empire, all that subsided. Women became less important. Then today's culture in the Middle East does not give women any importance at all, regardless of what Eman mentioned about women making strides. But the generation I grew up with, I was born in 44. Let's say until 1960, women didn't have any influence on anything, you know. But this is not the culture of Islam. It's the culture of Arabism in the Middle East that did that. But the Prophet said something that we need to stop and think about very carefully. He said, heaven, which is the ultimate purpose of the life of a Muslim. All my hope is to get to heaven. He said, heaven lies under your mother's feet. So if you want to get to heaven, if you want to be in heaven, sit on her feet, hug them and kiss them. So how can anybody disrespect his mother especially after the Prophet taught him, not only that she is your mother, that you naturally have allegiance to her, but she controls heaven. They're under her feet. If she's happy with you, you're going to get there. If she's upset with you, you're not going to see it, you know.
I want to say something here. In 1992, we moved from the United States here to Saudi Arabia, and we lived in Jeddah. I heard so many things in Jeddah about what I can't do. I couldn't get into business. I couldn't do anything, charity. I just could not be myself. I had to be closed in, and that's all what I continuously heard from anybody I met. During those years since then, I've accomplished so much, and I humbly would say this just to make the point. I became president of an organization. I've done so many charity. I had our diagnostic imaging center and became the CEO of American Healthcare and Management Company. And I've said to people, I will continue to do what I need to do until somebody stops me. And in all those years since then, no one has come to me and said, you can't do what you are doing. So a lot of it comes from women hearing certain things that are really created by men and believing it and taking a back seat and not living up to their full potential. So it really depends on whether the person or the woman has it in her to achieve. And I think that exists anywhere, really. I look around me in the Middle East, like I said, to me, Egypt is an example. They have a lot of problems, but there is one thing about them, that woman is equal in the marketplace. Now, when I came here in the mid-70s, this was my first time arriving to the US. I arrived in 1975. There was something that surprised me tremendously. There was a campaign for the Equal Right Amendment, and it was led by many persons from Hollywood. And I used to tell Safi, I was astonished. Women in this country don't have their equal right status. How can that be? And what surprised me even more is the fact that that failed to be voted into the Constitution. And then I was told later that you have to wait 25 years to try to amend the Constitution again. You can't do it like the following year. You have to wait after you've tried and failed. You have to wait for 25 more years. That has always been a source of bewilderment to me. Yet I look around and see that women did take their equal right potential despite the lack of legality of given to them, because they worked hard, because they put themselves out there and they tested the water again and again and again, until we know now there are so many women CEOs in the country. And I see the same situation happening in the Middle East. When I first got to Saudi Arabia, there were no women in the workforce, none. Now there are women that are CEO of their companies, and they are taking a tremendous strive and moving forward, and they are equal partners. So it really, this situation is not unique to the Middle East. I think this situation existed all over the world, and it continued to be a challenge in many parts of the world. And it has nothing to do with religion. I feel God gave us our due rights, and it reflects on each of us individually.
Eden, why don't you unmute? Do you have any questions or comments at this point, especially relative to this?
I think he's still muted.
You're still muted.
Oh, yeah?
There you go. Now you can.
Okay.
I got it.
First of all, I'm cheering you on, Eman. Like, wow, that is fantastic. And I'm probably just behind you, but I think you've plowed a lot of ground for women like me. And you probably have budded, had to till the soil ahead, and then all these other seeds and women can come along behind you. And I just want to say thank you for the effort and the success that you have had on behalf of many other women, just women in general of any faith or no faith at all.
Mhm.
I'm extremely proud of you, and I've only just met you, but I wish we weren't facing off between screens here, actually.
Thank you.
We'll
This
get
is
together.
fascinating. Yeah.
Eventually, yes.
This is a really fascinating thing to hear.
Oh, Eden, I've had men that refuse to talk to me because I'm not covered in the place of work in Saudi Arabia. So I've had that happen. And usually, because I insisted one time, there was a man holding a baby and his wife was about to go in for an X-ray, and he insisted he wanted to go in with her and holding the baby. And I refused to allow him. I said, I'm sorry, you can't
Right.
go in. Especially you have a baby, you're holding a baby. There's no way I will allow you. Well, of course, he thought women that can give her opinion and give order like this is something he is not accustomed to. And he would not look at me when he was speaking to me. He's turning the other way. So, but I insisted, and my command stood, and he wasn't able
She
to.
usually gets her way.
And I sent him an Egyptian technician that was covered, a female. I said, she will go in with her. He was concerned because the technician for the X-ray was a male. I said, here is a woman that can go in and be with your wife, but you are not allowed to go in. And it's something that he has never experienced before. And when the technician came back to me, she told me he was going on and on about women that are speaking their mind like I have. So, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. If we live our principle, it doesn't matter what other people, eventually they'll catch up. And I think this is what is happening. People are catching up.
I totally agree. I think, you know, in my life, I have had some situations where there was resistance, we'll call it resistance, to me playing a role that, you know, I led a church. I was the lead pastor, and we had a team, so it wasn't quite so lofty as all that, but there was resistance at times. And I think you have to just realize as a woman that that's not going to be the last word. That really you can go past that, and you can let something slide, or recognize that that person is just in the midst of their own process, and someday maybe it will only be in heaven that they will recognize, oh, I missed a point here. I missed a spot where I could bless someone. But most of my experience has been where men have opened the door for me, and where, you know, so even taking leadership of the church. Brad had been the pastor until I took over. He had a burnout, and the leadership team came to me to ask, would you consider taking the lead of the church? And I felt I really needed to pray about this. And so I took a couple of weeks, and then I felt like God was saying, this is what I have for you. I want you to take this. And so in obedience, but reluctance as well, I chose to follow where Jesus was calling me. And I had 5 glorious years where really I can only recall 1 or 2 times where anyone said anything kind of questioning or kind of a bit of a backlash. Most of the time it was men and women together expressing their love for me, for my role, for what I brought. And I didn't take the role to be that I needed to fill Brad's shoes and act like a man, but that my role was meant to be, excuse me, to be me leading fully a woman with all the components of my feminine self, And we were, as a little church, we were in a place where we were hurting. We were suffering. And God just said to me, they need a mother right now.
Nurturing. I was going to say
exactly.
That, nurturing. Yeah.
And so I just said, oh, I know how to mother. I have 3 boys. I can do this. And as soon as he kind of laid out that track for me, I realized, oh, this is not about trying to be as powerful as I can. It is about nurturing, loving, caring, and helping this community to heal. And it was glorious, not because of the power I had, but because of the reaction of people coming back to me and just expressing how much they loved me. Yeah, it was incredible. And actually, there was several times when there was guests in the congregation, and they would come to me afterwards and they'd said, your congregation really loves you. And I said, and I really love them. But what's most fascinating about this is that I said, you know, this is a little window leading here. But I said, there are individuals who have led congregations and multiple congregations their entire lives, and they have never been loved in not one of those places. I wish that every person who has had to lead, especially in a faith community, would have just one experience where in that community they were loved so beautifully that they didn't have to constantly be questioning their own value.
Yes.
Wow.
Let's
I so respect your choice to take that part. I know that's not easy because it's a huge responsibility, and that's amazing. That is really amazing.
Yeah, she brought healing to the congregation while she was also having to carry me a little bit, you know, through that.
Wow.
Yeah. We're running out of time, but I would like to I'd like to ask one last question, just about what it is you'd want Christians to know about the Prophet Muhammad, because Christians often have misconceptions about him.
Yes.
And then you can add anything else you want after that.
Yes, I want Christians to know that Prophet Muhammad is not what they think he is, because the media sold them a bag of beans and they're all bought into it. Prophet Muhammad is not a terrorist, is not a womanizer, is not an aggressive guy who go and raid his neighbors. He is not a thief who steals from his neighbors. I've heard all these things said about him, you know, and he is not the person that I thought I love, the person that I think I try to imitate his way of life in everything I do. I think he and Jesus in many different ways are 2 faces to the same coin. I know Christian will get shocked hearing this, but please take your time, look into it. This is my feeling. I'm being candid, sharing it with you. You know, so just take it for whatever it is. Yeah, he's a guy that taught me to be humble, like same way Jesus did. Taught me to love everybody else, same way Jesus. He taught me to love my Christian neighbors. Many Muslims have a superiority complex. I talked about this yesterday on Facebook. They think because they have the last revelations, they're better than anybody else. They understand that after Islam, everybody else should be a Muslim. No other religion should be accepted. Well, that contradicts the Qur'an. In the Qur'an, God's saying, if I wanted to create one community, I would have made you all one community with one faith. But I made you several community so you can teach each other. Push, like iron sharpening iron. You know, this pushing of ideas. We are different, so let's see who has the better idea. And then he says, so you can race each other toward serving each other and doing good. This is in 548 in the Quran.
A competition of servanthood, right?
Yes,
Yes.
One of my favorite things about Prophet Muhammad is on his deathbed, he asked his disciples to take especially care of the woman. He repeated it. He said, I am asking you to care for the woman. So that is near and dear to my heart.
What's the other thing he asked him to do? Prayers?
Yes.
And women.
Yes.
These are the two things he was concerned
with
on his deathbed.
On his deathbed. So I would advise people to learn about him, to read about him.
What book would you recommend?
Karen Armstrong, a prophet for our times.
She has a very good biography on Prophet Muhammad.
Start with that and move to something else.
There are many other. They can look at several and compare for themselves. But I want to say one of the things that hurt me the most about being here in the US and being targeted as a Muslim is the fact that Safi and I have learned and studied the Old Testament and the New Testament and compared the Quran to it. We did so much homework for the purpose of reconciliation as opposed to alienating others. We didn't grab the Quran and say this is for us and that's it. And everyone that doesn't believe in it is outside of this formula. No, it's an inclusive book that included everybody. One of the things that hurt me the most is the lack of inclusivity for Muslim. It's like we come from a different planet or something, that it's not, while we consider the Quran is a continuation of the previous scriptures. This is something that most people that have a negative opinion about Islam adhere to, and that is something that's very hurtful to Muslims. It actually makes stops the conversation dead in its track, because if you're not considered as a person of the book as we consider Christian and Jews to be, then the conversation ends right there and then. So to just have an open mind would be great.
Yeah, and to do our homework, right? Well, I'm so very grateful for this time. I think we should do a follow-up sometime as well.
Brad?
Yeah, go ahead.
Can I just close with a story?
Sure.
So this was a little bit time ago, maybe 13, 14 years ago. We had an opportunity to take our family to London, and it was in the summer, so we didn't have to take them out of school or anything. And we were there for probably about 2.5 or 3 weeks. And it's interesting, you can be in a place that is full of so many people, millions of people, and you don't feel seen or heard or known, right? And I woke up one morning feeling very unconnected and unseen and unknown. And I prayed a really short prayer, and that was, Jesus, I want to see you today. So we had a big day lined up with our kids, things we were going to see, and we were all over London that day, walking, busing, subway, and everywhere I was looking for Jesus. And I could hardly get anyone to look at, like have eye contact with. And I was a little discouraged, actually. I thought, wow, millions of people, and I can't see you, Jesus. So we were actually the last few 100 feet from the place that we were staying. We were staying in the East End. And between the buildings were long sidewalks. And we were crossing this common area. There was grass on either side of us. And Brad was at the front of us. We were all just trudging by this time. We were so tired. Brad was in the front, and then our 3 boys were in the middle, and I was bringing up the rear. And as we entered this long, straight sidewalk, I saw a woman coming towards us, and she had in a full burqa, only had her eyes showing. And I watched her watch my family. And as we came together, because we were coming from different ends, she didn't look at Brad at all. He was at the front. She didn't look at Brad at all. But then our boys were they're all tall. They're all taller than Brad. They're 6'4", 5 and 6, or 6 and 8. And I could see, without trying to look too obvious, she was noticing how tall and thin they were. And she looked at each one. And then there was this moment where her eyes and my eyes connected. And I could only see her eyes, but I could see her smile. I could see her saying, "I see you, Mama. I see how proud you are of your boys." And I saw Jesus in that moment. And I thought, all of these people, maybe I would have just looked away and thought, no, I can't see Jesus there. But there he was in her. And all I could see was her eyes. And it has been one of the most amazing revelations of Jesus that I have ever had in my life. And I have lots of stories and lots of ways Jesus has been in my life. But that was just this beautiful, amazing moment. And so as you spoke and as you shared, I thought, none of this surprises me, but it is glorious to hear. And only because the context of that little moment with this woman who I will never meet again. And if I did, I wouldn't even know who she was.
Yeah, I have similar story to this. Maybe next time we'll share them.
Yes.
Yeah.
But thanks for sharing.
Thank you.
This is a heart-touching story.
Yes.
Fantastic. Really. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, thank you. And thank you for showing us by your lives what the Quran means by the all-merciful God. It's
Thank you.
truly a good reminder to everybody who's going to watch this. So we'll break now, but we will see you again one day. And we're going to get this up online for people as soon as possible today. So again, thank you. And until next time, God bless you.
For a second, Brad.
Say that again.
When you hang up, can you stay on for a second? I want to talk to you about something.
Oh, for sure. All right. All right. Have a good one. Bless you.
Thank you.